Another week goes by in the unending saga of Nintendo versus Power World, and for once we have some positive news, but of course that depends on which team you're batting for, I suppose. So for those of you who aren't caught up or have just been able to avoid all this drama, Power World is an open world survival game which puts the player into a world of creatures called pals. These pals are utilized for everything from fighting to manual labor. To gain ownership of these pals, the player needs to quite literally beat them to within an inch of their life and then throw what is called a pal sphere at them. You get bonus points for whacking them in the face, and if everything goes right, congrats, you've got yourself a pal. Now anyone who knows anything about Pokemon will immediately see the similarities here, and even how most people openly describe Power World as Pokemon with guns clearly shows that the game took heavy inspiration from Pokemon, but we wouldn't be talking about this at all if that was where the story ended. Instead, we're watching as the greedy corporation, who I talked about in last week's upload, decided that taking inspiration was no longer allowed and that they were going to go to war with Power World, and inadvertently the entire gaming industry. So for those of you who don't actually know anything about what was going on, it started with a patent lodged in 2021 by Nintendo, which shows a player character catching a dinosaur, yes, a dinosaur, by throwing something at it. Now I did spend the time to track down the actual patent just to make sure it wasn't as ridiculous as the initial picturing suggested, and the submitted images are a little less unintelligible, showing a Pokeball but still a dinosaur being captured and then the dinosaur fighting. So beware paleontologists, Nintendo has you on their legal radar. Dragons show up there too. Jokes aside, or at least I certainly hope they're jokes, a bit further on we get an exposition of the doodles in question, where we see a lot of the usage of the words non-limiting, which to my limited understanding means that just because they don't explicitly state or reference something, they're able to basically decide at a later date, oh no, we meant that too. Now, I'm no legal person, but when filing a patent suggesting your concept is non-limiting, that just seems a little bit unreasonable. From there, we fast forward to 2024 and the release of Power World. The Big N had been very quiet the whole time. Through several years of development, a handful of trailers and videos and growing hype for the game, despite people knowing that it would attract the ire of Nintendo, and surely enough, it did, but only and only after its resounding success. Which, before I jump into more details, raises a question. Surely Nintendo knew about Power World, so why bother waiting to see if it would sink or swim to level a lawsuit? Why wait for its success before then deciding that you feel threatened enough to start a lawsuit? In January of 2024, Nintendo stated that it was going to investigate Power World. Both parties would then remain quiet until July, where Power World teamed up with Sony Music Entertainment and Aniplex in a step to turn Power World into a serious competing franchise to Pokemon. But still, there was no lawsuit. It wasn't until much later that year of September 2024 that Nintendo and Pokemon Company made their move, issuing a patent infringement lawsuit against Power World's developer Pocketpair. And in a humble response that has been the case with Power World, they apologized to fans for the worry and discomfort. In November, it was announced that Nintendo and Pokemon Company were seeking damages of around $66,000 US. It was at this point that Power World started to make changes to their game, likely to avoid further disruptions and legal garbage. Removing the ability to throw a PAL sphere somewhere and have their PAL appear where the sphere was thrown. This was replaced with just having the PAL appear next to the player. This was obviously not taken well by the fan base, but for once, very little vitriol was directed towards developer Pocketpair. Instead, much of the animosity was aimed squarely at Nintendo. In May of 2025, Power World made yet another change, removing the ability to glide using PALs and having players use a glider instead. This change was stated to be directly due to the lawsuit, and once again, further fan anger was directed towards Nintendo. Since this, Nintendo has become extremely scummy in their attempts to drag Power World down into the disgusting, bare-bones state that is the current Pokemon franchise, attempting to lodge new patents to utilize in their war against Power World. Recently, we saw 3 new ones make it through the US Patent and Trademark Office, with no one having seemingly done any research prior to accepting them. But more recently, Nintendo has taken a small but well-deserved loss in their unjust crusade against Power World. Another more recent patent application they submitted, likely in an attempt to continue to bog down Pocketpair in legal fees, has been rejected, citing a lack of inventive step and listing a small handful of games, one of which being Pokemon Go. Yes, you absolutely heard me say that one. Nintendo just got stitched up by their own franchise. Now, in the long run, this means absolutely nothing. It was a non-final decision, so that means that Nintendo will undoubtedly redo their patent submission and resubmit it, likely as many times as they need to in order to get it out of the gate. This is a $100 billion company. They have enough money to play this game for the next 100 years if they have to, certainly enough to bleed Pocketpair dry many times over. And seeing as this lawsuit was filed in Japan, there is no doubt in my mind that Pokemon and Nintendo will certainly have a limited bias in the court due to how prevalent the Pokemon franchise is. They also have the money to continue to delay the proceedings as long as they need to. Is it fair to say these things? Absolutely not, but it is unfortunately how the world works, and we're seeing it in action with Nintendo throwing out new patents every other month in order to gain the upper hand, not only against Palworld, but many other upcoming media as well. This all clearly sets a dangerous precedent, which I think is obvious to anybody who plays these games to enjoy them and have fun. Unfortunately, in the corporate world, this is rarely the case with people who have no obligation to understand anything beyond what's written on the paper falling on their desk. As I said before, I'm no legal expert, but I'm not alone in saying that Nintendo has not done anything at all with the Pokemon franchise as far as actual invention goes. We saw the very first actual change only just recently with Pokemon Legends ZA, where they tried to make a new combat system, one which failed in spectacular fashion because it was never actually tested properly before implementation, but to their credit, it is the only actual new thing they've done in nearly 30 years. Now, having gone over a couple of the patent submissions and watched more than enough Pokemon ZA footage, I want to say that I don't actually believe the changes to the combat system were for the benefit of players or for the sake of innovation. In fact, it's my genuine belief that there's a much darker side to this, one which involves an excuse to list new patents in an attempt to lock down even more gameplay mechanics. But this comes with its own problems, as currently Nintendo have been encroaching on the mechanics utilized by games such as Dark Souls, Ark Survival Evolved, Craftopia, Tomb Raider, Monster Hunter 4, and most, if not all, MMORPGs, and claiming them as their own. This includes features added by mods and modders, which Nintendo claims shouldn't be recognized as prior art. So understandably, you can see that they're doing everything they can to try and muddy the waters of this case in their favor. But should Nintendo win this case, it will set a very dangerous standard, not just with Nintendo, but with other developers and publishers too. Many could scramble to patent the most basic of gameplay loops, leading to games becoming very limited and stagnant after everyone's too scared to put a system in their games which could already be patented. It's a slippery slope, and even if other developers don't do this, what's stopping Nintendo from going crazy with power as they already are? With new games like Honkai Nexus Anima and Anemo being developed, which also would appear to infringe on the growing list of Nintendo patents, we really have to start considering if Nintendo has gone too far and where they'll stop if they do win this lawsuit. And more importantly, what that could mean for all games in the future. In an amazing twist of irony though, this video was a little delayed due to some personal things I had going on, but it did delay it enough that I can now happily say, due to all the outrage probably over what Nintendo has been doing, the US Patent and Trademark Office has been ordered to reevaluate at least one of the patents given to Nintendo just recently, which had previously seemed to just slip through unchecked. Now, while this is nothing that will stop Nintendo, as much alike previous problems they have, Nintendo will no doubt just rewrite and resubmit because it's all they can do to try and disrupt their Palworld lawsuit, but at the very least, it would appear as if there is a little bit of justice in the world and proof that enough people campaigning for something in the right way can bring the attention it sometimes needs. But that's just my opinion. If you have a different one or even a similar one, feel free to let me know in the comments, and if you enjoyed the video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the bell to know when I upload.